Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode number 3 of the Cloud Underground podcast. I'm Laura, this is NATO, and we are here today talking about tech news, information, and our topic of the day is innovation. So thanks for tuning in. If you like this video, go ahead and subscribe to our channel. And you can see all of our weekly podcast episodes, plus other cool videos and news and events here at the Cloud Underground.
So there's a lot going on. We pretty much just make things all the time, and that's what we as people just like to make things. Like Laura is a person who likes to make things,
creative
and I like to make things.
We have trouble standing still, or sitting still. At least I do.
Yeah, and like there's always got to be a new project, or if you made something, then it's glorious for a spell until you like find the new thing that you have to build. Like, I have to make the next thing.
It's true. Okay, we're gonna start off today by talking about a few various news items that we've been reading about recently. Let me pull those up. Okay, so first, I keep reading about how offices are really trying to get their workforces back, how companies are trying to get their workforces like back in office spaces, which, I don't know, I think NATO and I have particular opinions about working in offices to begin with, because, I mean, even before COVID, we each had done a lot of remote working, and have always kind of preferred that to, like, going into an office. I mean, if you can stay home and have your laptop at home and work from home where you're comfortable, where you have limited distractions, like, why not? I don't know. I was excited when more companies started, making their workforces remote due to COVID. Of course, the circumstances of that were not necessarily the greatest, but I was like, okay, we're embracing this new like trend of like having a remote workforce.
Yeah.
So I was kind of all for that, but now they're like, people are like trying, like they're all raring to get back into the office space, which I don't totally understand. What do you think? What do you think of this, NATO?
I mean, obviously it's not everyone who wants to go back to an office, but an interesting thing about that is, as long as the leadership wants to go back to an office, it doesn't even have to be the majority of anyone at a company who wants to go back to an office. And that's, I think, where it gets interesting. Because, I see a lot of teams where people have, like, their differing opinions, where you'll have leadership and they're rearing up to be like, yeah, we're going back to the office. And then everyone on their team is like, oh, I don't want to go back to the office. And then they try to convince them, where they'll be like, no, it's going to be great. You're going to, and don't you miss the office? And everyone unanimously, at a lot of, on these disagreeing teams, are just like, no.
Yeah, well, it seems like particularly larger companies, like in this article, it talks about Salesforce, how they're going to be providing, coronavirus testing for employees. And of course, it's only for like volunteers who've been vaccinated if they want to come back to work, limited capacity. So it's like, I don't know, they're kind of trying to like ease back into it. Microsoft, same thing. They're just kind of, letting people come back slowly but surely as they want to, with like a hybrid model. But the other thing about this is, I on the other side of this is like your employees, and like how are employees feeling about like going back into a workforce, like, as individuals after the year that we've had, how do people actually feel about going back to an office? And I think a lot of people actually have a lot of anxiety about that. I found another article that kind of was like that side of this, countering this narrative that we need to get back into an office, where it's like, yeah, but we've all been through so much, like give us all a little time and space and time to like trust people and organizations again and ease back into it.
Yeah, because human beings in general don't adjust well to immediate change, and if you've ever been a manager of a large team, like it's something you'll notice, and it's very obvious. If you've never managed a large team, this is not something you notice. But if you're managing a large team, and then there are going to be those people who are so excited, like they've been waiting for so long. They're like, I just can't wait to go back to the office and be around the people again. Like, you're going to get those people.
Yeah.
And then you're going to get those who are like, oh my gosh, like I'm falling apart on the inside. Like, how am I going to go back to an office? Like, maybe they're scared of just going outside after everything that everyone's been through, because that, that anxiety is real, and
it's real trauma. Yeah, we've all experienced some like actual like real like traumatizing events.
Yeah, and especially if someone got laid off because of COVID and all that good stuff, and lost their job, and then they like just got a new job. It's like remote, and they're like, oh my gosh, and they've been and so you really do, as a manager, if you expect that everyone's going to be all like excited, gung ho, like that person, like that might even be half of the team. But if you have a team of like, even like 30 people, if you have a team of 30 people and then like half of those 30 people are dreading going back to the office, like that's a really complicated situation to navigate.
Negative vibes happening when you come back.
Yeah,
Well, and the other thing, I guess my other question for you, Nato, is do you think the offices are less productive when they're all in a remote environment, or do you think that that the tools that are out there are like really adequate enough to like keep everybody connected enough so that you don't miss out on normal like day-to-day work activities?
I think productivity remote is a very individual thing. You'll find that some people don't get anything done if they're not like around a whole bunch of other people, and then other people, like if you want them to get anything done at all, you just need to leave them alone and stay as far away from them as humanly possible. There's a saying like in the executive circles where executives, when they're trying to hire directors and people who are supposed to be more autonomous personalities, the way to manage an autonomous personality is to hurry up and get out of their way. And that saying exists for a reason. And a lot of times, a lot of those personalities who get a lot done when you just get out of their way, like go away, they get the most done when they're just leave them alone. Like let them be at home, let them work at their own schedule.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And the other nice thing I think about working remotely, particularly for somebody like me or you, is like, I don't know, we're not what you would quote unquote call like morning people. Like I don't function well before like 11 a.m. So you can put me in an office, you can make me be there at 8, but you're probably not going to get any work out of me for like those first 3 hours of the day, despite my best efforts or whatever. It's not like something I do on purpose, but it's just like... I cognitively am just like not very present until I've had a couple cups of coffee and kind of like gotten into the morning a little bit. And so it's like, I like the flexibility of being able to, work hours that are more flexible. Of course, you have meeting times that you need to be at like at particular times of day. And of course you can always show up for those, but then maybe go for a walk or like take a little more time to ease into like your work mode or whatever. So that sort of flexibility is always really nice and something that I cherish.
Especially for those who do more like, I guess, cognitive labor. Like if you're the type where the type of work that you do is around like strategy and figuring out how to go to market and trying to run a business, especially, and dealing with like the management of the operations and things like that. If you're working in a call center and you're on a help desk team, that sort of a situation could just be a matter of, not having an office means that like people's home internet or phone connections might be inconsistent. So they need an office so that everyone can go, and that's where all their connections that work the best are. And great. And then they show up, sit on the phone, go home, and life is fine. But for people who do more like labor where they're trying to strategize and need time to innovate, because if you're a developer, an architect, an engineer of sorts, a manager, a director, I could go on. I don't want anyone to think that I'm excluding whatever your cognitive labor is. Because even certain help desk roles can be very cognitive, like being an escalation engineer on a help desk. Maybe it might be better for someone like that to not work in an office. I guess what I was really trying to get at is that going to an office, it doesn't mean more productivity. That's all I'm trying to say. And in a lot of ways, for certain personalities, you'll taint productivity.
Right.
And for the most part, I'll say that putting people in an office is more likely to have certain... it depends, I guess, but
Yeah.
It's complicated.
It's complicated. All right. On to the next item of business. So I was reading about this really cool program called, they're calling it the Public Infrastructure Security Cyber Education System, or PICES, which is a nonprofit that is working with colleges in the U.S. to provide network monitoring and threat detection to small public sector organizations, or small municipalities. I thought this was actually really cool because they're so basically they're taking college kids and then pairing them with small communities that don't have other ways to manage their cybersecurity, that they're
great.
Let's just buy a firewall and pay for a firewall and that's our security. But really that's not enough, as we were talking about last week with that story about a school district that got hacked or had a malware attack, and they wanted a $40 million ransom. So I think it's really cool. It's a great way for students to learn hands-on cybersecurity in a way that's benefiting them, so that they're learning, but it's also actually benefiting a community, and great resume builder, great hands-on.
And I've been a huge advocate for learning through real-world experiences. And even if anyone were to go to my YouTube channel, NATO is Code, I talk about, you can go and volunteer is one of the best ways to learn. And it's great to see a college recognizing that, hey, we can help facilitate an experience that's going to be very educational.
Definitely.
And I think it's a great way for people to really get experience and learn and help
I love it.
all at the same time.
I think it's super cool.
Like a win for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I want to see more things like it.
Good initiative. Good feel-good story. Okay, and then one last thing in the billionaire space race. Because this one just made me laugh. Because, the billionaire space race is just a ridiculous thing to begin with. But apparently Jeff Bezos' company, Blue Origin, had a successful rocket launch test just this morning. We're filming this Wednesday, just today.
Yeah.
Which means they're getting closer to putting people on their rocket ships and achieving Jeff Bezos' goal of having floating
space vacations.
Space vacations.
Space yacht.
Space yachts. Space yachts and space colonies, floating colonies in space. Elon wants to go to Mars. Bezos is let's just float around in space.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Elon's I want to go to another planet, and Bezos is I just want to float around.
I'd go on a space cruise.
Yeah.
I'd probably be more likely to do that than go to Mars, honestly.
If we start getting space cruises, does that mean that we're going to end up with space pirates? It's kind of like the ocean, right? In between planets be the new continents. We're going to have Mars
they be
and space stations along the way.
From other planets?
Instead of
alien pirates, or are these human pirates?
Like human pirates, because think about the ocean. Pirates coming out we're gonna board your we're gonna board your ship and take all your loot.
So will the Blue Origin rockets be taking out the SpaceX rockets or something?
No. If we have SpaceX and all these things, and then we have.
Right, but who's funding the pirate rockets? That's what I want to know.
There's a black market.
NASA.
How did pirates get ships in the first place? By doing illegal things.
I don't know.
It's pirates. Pirates are pirates. They go and find the They'll make their own space. They'll steal the plans and then create giant 3D printers and 3D print their own pirate ships, and then fly off into space and because think about it, it's it's going to be probably at least maybe at least 10 to 20 years before we start seeing going on a space cruise and be oh yeah, we're just out here in space. But by then someone else will have made some way to go and try to sabotage things, because that's what people do.
Well, folks, you heard it here first. Watch out for
Sabotage.
those space pirates.
Right.
On your next space cruise.
Gotta watch out.
Keep an eye out.
We're gonna have space security, space cybersecurity, radars trying to identify unknown incoming spacecrafts, and then all of a sudden you find out it's one of them aliens, and you're like, I knew it. No, I don't. Anyway, that's besides the point. So.
Wow, that was a rabbit hole. Okay, moving on to innovation. We're talking about innovation today. What is innovation? Let's talk about it.
It's a good question.
Maybe we should Google it. Let's Google innovation.
That's a good question. Let's read a dictionary explanation of innovation.
Innovation.
Because if there's a place called Ovation, then if you're inside of it, then you're in Ovation. I don't know if ovation's a word, and if it's something that I shouldn't have said, then I'll take that back at a later time. But
I think you're good. I don't think you have to worry about.
Isn't like ovation like an applaud? Like
like a standing ovation would be.
So then if you're
applause.
innovation, does that mean you're in the ovation?
Maybe you're the one being
innovation.
Ovated.
Your innovation.
Okay.
In it.
All right. Enough puns, Nathan. Okay. So innovate. Innovation derived from the word innovate, to make changes in something established, especially by introducing new methods, ideas, or products. So, what do you say to people who think that innovation is like the digital age is ending? Innovation is over. Moore's law is dead. You know, that we're just like falling into this funk of like we're not going to improve upon anything anymore, and yeah.
That sounds like the talk of someone who's not deep into engineering and knows how to do a lot of things to the point to where they can actually come up with new ideas. So, I mean, if you don't know how things work, I guess that could be how you might see the world and be like, no one could possibly make anything more advanced than where it is. And it's not even about being advanced. If you take something that is maybe advanced, maybe not advanced, doesn't really matter what it is, and you iterate on it, it doesn't even have to be a beneficial iteration. If you make any sort of change to it, then you're innovating. You could even be innovating for the worst, where you're making it not even work as well. Or you could be innovating to make it work better. You could be innovating to make it look a certain way. So I always kind of look at it as, it's funny because in the context of like legal things, if something is at least about like, if you can quantify it to be somehow about 10% different from something else, then oftentimes you can find a way to defend it in like a legal situation as its new thing or a new something.
Yeah, as like its own invention.
Yeah, and so even just taking like something and tweaking it a little bit, like 10%, technically that would be a form of an innovation. It might not be a major innovation, might not be a huge earth-shattering innovation, but it's still innovation. How do you feel about it?
Well, yeah, no, I think it's like ridiculous that people would say that innovation is dead, or that, you know, we're not gonna be making significant changes, because I think that that's just inherently what people do all the time, and as like new generations come along, or as information becomes more accessible to more people, then more and more people are able to expand on existing ideas and create new ideas from those ideas, and just, you know, it kind of snowballs into kind of a perfect storm of innovation.
And one thing I run into is, because, you know, I work more in like the sciences, but people will oftentimes kind of try to make certain things political, and I feel like, to me, something, I don't look at innovation as something that's political. I guess someone might, but in the context of, like, we're talking about space, and you know, Amazon having a successful launch, and while maybe that might not be innovative, that Amazon, they had I thought it was Amazon's ship that landed.
No, it's not Amazon. It's Bezos' company.
Oh,
but it's not Amazon.
So I guess it's just Bezos in general.
No,
so
it's called. I can tell you.
That's fine. I'm just making the point. I just want to make my point.
Blue Origin.
My only point is that, like, the first time we made a ship that was able to come back down and land in general, that's an innovation whether or not someone wants to believe that's an innovation or not, because it's something that's new that hasn't been done, that's incrementally changing something in a way that's going to do something new. And, then it goes down to, we have cell phones and things like that, and we might think that cell phones, oh, well, we don't need them to get smaller and other things, but there's so much more going on than just whether or not cell phones can get more sophisticated or, however have you.
Right.
Even if you were to just say that a new phone came out that works just like last year's phone, where the battery where it lasts twice as long, and then you also have it set up to where out of the box it generates its own internet service for anything that you want to connect to it at the same time, and it uses that for the benefit of that battery. I don't know anyone who said anything quite like that. We have like mobile hotspots. We have like all these other things, and a mobile hotspot is a phone being used as a satellite relay. But, we could, there's so many random things that someone might just be like, oh, this would work better. And then bam, that's a new product.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times it is incremental. But the thing about, the time that we're living in is these incremental changes happen so much more quickly because information spreads so much faster now than it did 150 years ago, 200 years ago. So I think, it's, and oftentimes I think the next great idea, you don't even realize that it's revolutionary until it's kind of taken a hold and you've kind of come to see some of the consequences of whatever it is. So I don't know. I think innovation can come in a lot of different ways. What do you think is a way to, or how do you think we can foster more innovation, either as people or companies, or what can we do to increase innovation in a world that, the faster we can innovate and create better solutions, the better off we'll be.
So we're in this world where everyone wants to figure out how to scale this, and then people are focused on money, scale. And what does money and scale have to do with anything is you can take mathematical formulas and apply things to okay, so if we do this scale stuff, what that is it creates, in my opinion, it stifles innovation by adding a lot of process, a lot of red tape, and then when things start becoming more about money and more about some of this other stuff and less about trying to drive ideas forward or trying to try something that might fail. When people are trying to do business and things like that, and we look at Silicon Valley, investors don't invest in something that they think might fail. But the thing that might fail is where innovation tends to be. And as we, grow more toward culture of scale and a culture who's obsessed with money and stuff like that, the more we lean in that direction, I see people focusing more on this process and things having to be done the way that makes that scale happen so that you can reach this unicorn thing or reach this thing that was so great because, these big companies set a standard that other entrepreneurs and other people look at as I have to be someone who's not me. And so people start to look outside of themselves. I think innovation comes from looking inside of oneself. And the challenge of that is if you have a lot of people and you have a big company of a lot of people, if everyone's trying to innovate, really, for someone to innovate, they got to break away and kind of go on their own journey and go and try things that you've never tried before, try things that you've never heard of before. If you're doing things that you've heard of, or, I'll put it this way. I would say that in a lot of ways, anytime you're trying to learn an existing process, that would be the opposite of innovation. Even though
but it's still necessary to learn processes, right, in order to...
Yeah, I would say there's a time for both, and I think one thing that's important is it's easy to get in this psychological thing because our society is so black and white with things good or bad, and so we'll talk about well, if it doesn't have innovation, does that means it's bad? It's no, well then that means it's good. It's no, it's not quite that. So it's if we're trying to have a society that can have innovation and we can also have scale in some of these things, I think it's just important to understand the difference between them and what you're trying to accomplish. If you're trying to innovate, then I think it's important to understand that maybe focusing on the money and the rules and those things then you need to kind of shift your understanding of what it means to innovate, in my opinion. But if you're trying to scale something and you're trying to make sure that something can grow and get stability and maybe even get funding to innovate, because getting funding to innovate, if you don't have any money at all, getting innovative at trying to generate money to innovate with can just result in nothing ever happening. So sometimes you have to start with the boring things to innovate, because generating money generates time. Generating time generates the ability to just do random stuff. And if you generate enough money to like shoulder loss, like especially as a business or an entrepreneur, then you can get more innovation that way. So then I guess the question is, how do you get more time? So I guess figuring out how to get more time is when you think about, then it's more appropriate to consider innovation, I guess. As something practical.
That makes sense.
Innovation. So when we're talking about innovation, like one thing that I think is really important to consider is like self-belief matters, because I mean there's the idea of like confidence and things like that, and people talk about that, but people don't really go down into like necessarily what that means. And if you're trying to create something new, and if I'm saying that like innovation comes from looking inward, like what does that mean? Because if you don't have any self-awareness or any self-belief that if you put something out there that it's going to be okay, you don't even have to think that what you're making is good or right or like done correctly. You might think that it's a mess even, but as long as you have enough like self-stock to put your own ideas out there and run that risk of facing that the idea might be received whatever ways you might be fearing, oftentimes everything has a much better, if your outlook is like that, things usually have a better reception than I think people expect. But I think investing in yourself and investing in your own ideas and putting your own energy and your own time and your own money and stuff into like building up your own ideas, I think that a lot of innovation can come from trying to build that within yourself. Laura, do you think innovation comes more from self-belief, or do you think like it comes and just trying to figure that out? How do you feel about that, or do you have different thoughts, or I guess what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it does come from self-belief. I think if you don't have confidence in yourself and your own ideas and your own abilities, then you won't trust your ideas. And therefore, if you don't trust yourself and your ideas, then you won't be able to invent anything new or innovate on any existing ideas. So yeah, I think that's important. I also think that, if we can, like I was saying earlier, like create access to a greater number of people, to a more diverse like pool of people, then I think that also creates innovation, because then we have like a more mixed view of, or we then you have a wider pool of like beliefs to draw from, and I think everybody has like a different experience and like worldview, and I think that's important too, if we can all come together and present those things to each other and then work together. I think that can be powerful as well. So yeah, innovation. It
reminds me of something Seth Godin said, is that the ideas that don't make it out of your head never go anywhere. Basically, they just die. So if you want ideas to go anywhere, or you want to try learning what it means to innovate and things like that, even if you feel uncomfortable like sharing your idea, once again, even if you think your idea is the worst thing in the world, if you just put your ideas out there, you might be surprised. And that's innovation. In a lot of ways, innovation is overcoming the fear of getting those ideas out of your head, I guess, is how I see it.
Sure, yeah. I think that makes sense, definitely. Overcoming your own obstacles.
Yeah, like what's preventing you from getting your ideas out there? Because people say, well, I don't have an idea. You do have an idea, just there's something that makes you scared to share it.
Definitely. Any other thoughts about innovation and how we can... the importance of it, or how we can innovate more or foster innovation? What do you think? Any other thoughts?
Well, on a hot day, when you have a cooler full of Dr. Pepper, and you reach in and you grab that Dr. Pepper, and then you realize that koozies exist, then you understand the power of innovation.
Innovation.
And then that Dr. Pepper will stay cold for the rest of, well, hopefully until you're done drinking it.
Well, so now we got to figure out how to innovate the koozie.
Yeah.
To make it better.
Speaking of innovations, there was a question about networking, I guess.
We did. We had a question. So yeah, we want to just encourage anybody, if you have a question about anything we're talking about today, anything we've talked about in previous episodes, anything related to cloud or edge computing or cybersecurity or whatever. If you want to ask about Augustus, leave us a comment. And we will try and answer to the best of our abilities. So we did get a question from an audience member this past week, so I'll read it out and Nathan is going to talk a little bit about it. So this person says that they're coming from the enterprise network operations side, and he'd love to hear our thoughts on the direction of NetOps in the cloud. Many of the devices I use are cloud capable or have a cloud variant that can be deployed. Public clouds do networking differently. Private clouds and local clouds are often dependent on a legacy network, and interconnecting them isn't trivial. Many say traditional network engineering is going the way of the dinosaurs, and I'm finding devs want to abstract the network away. It's a critical part of the cloud, though. Here's your question. How can containerization and cloud-forward initiatives better help those of us in the network world?
I think that's a really powerful question, especially considering like the state of technology these days and the idea of networking. And when we talk about the idea of conventional networking, I guess one of the first things I should do is just kind of do like a really, really, really high level like jargon review, and then I'll try not to spend too much time ranting on the idea and try to get straight to the point. But the first thing I'm going to throw at you is look up what edge computing is. In my opinion, I believe that what's called edge computing is probably a major wave of the future in network engineering and network operations. So much so that, the idea of what edge computing brings is it sort of eliminates the need for networking to exist in a single location. So, let's say that you have an office, right? And in that office you have your on-premise servers, the servers that live in the office. So on-premise, oftentimes referred to as on-prem, means that you have your equipment in an office.
Yeah.
And so in technical spaces, oftentimes like people might need to either VPN into the office network for reasons, or they need to maybe connect to be in the office sometimes because that's where the network happens to be. And then the network engineer and the network operations are then able to be managed, there. And so with a lot of people moving to the cloud and doing home things, like people will sit there and maybe think, oh, well, I could just use, say, Google Cloud and Google Drive and just run my business that way and never have IT and never have networking operations again. And, on one end, that might sound nice, but the reality is there's a reason why people don't abandon having their own servers, even when there's like Google Drive. And you'll find like if you're the executive who's like, oh, we just use Google Drive, I bet you have that CTO or someone and you're like, well, do we really need the server? Can we get rid of the server? And they're like, no, you can't get rid of the server. And they're like, yeah, but I don't even understand what it does. And not every office has those conversations, but I've seen those conversations because, if you're not the technical person, then the idea of cloud might end at looking at your Gmail, like your Google Mail.
Sure. Yeah.
Or your Office 365. You're like, well, I have Office 365. That's all I'll ever need, right? But the reality is, if you're building your own applications and you're building your own things, well, networking, and we go back to like this idea of edge computing, with people working from homes and not working at offices, the idea of on-prem and on-premise can be basically living in the desks of every remote worker at a company. And let's say that there's a company with like 40 remote workers, 100% remote, no office whatsoever. Does that mean that you have to abandon your on-prem? Because that, you know, you need your network engineers and your network operations for on-prem to be maintained and managed and work. Well, you might think, well, okay, so I guess we're stuck with AWS, or maybe we're stuck with... You're not. Because nowadays, technology makes it to where the on-prem can basically live in your admin's like locations. You know, like in the home of who, like you might have a CTO, they probably have a home. And then maybe it becomes a benefit to other admins or network engineers who then like do your hosting, where then the hosting, instead of it being in an office, like maybe a part of the on-prem lives in every admin's and every network engineer's home. But does that mean that networking is going away? No, networking is actually going to be a lot more complicated in some ways, to where that's going to be a full-time job for at least 1 or 2 people who are going to sit there and just make sure the networking for the new future of on-prem is working. Like, okay, so we have 4 admins at this company. All 4 admins have on-prem equipment living in their offices and are on-prem. It's one environment, technically one data center, but because of edge computing, it's a data center that's split up into a mesh in multiple locations. And, you know, I work with SIM technologies with Blumira, so it's like even over there, like we bring data in from multiple different types of locations, and, you know, that's networking. And if you want that to work, or you want anything to talk, or you want your own servers still, as long as you want your own servers, there will be network operations. And as long as you want something that gives you more control, and you want your own apps, and you don't want to just use Office 365, and you don't want to just rent other people's stuff, because Office 365, you're renting that. What if you want your own infrastructure? What if you want your own stuff? You need network operations, need network engineers, need networking. And even in the cloud, and with the cloud, it just means that we have to change it. And maybe instead of us having standard switches, maybe switches are replaced with software switches. Maybe we have more what are called like serverless environments. But it's all networking. So I don't think, in a lot of ways, I think networking is going to become a responsibility of developers too, and not just network engineers. I can't see that.
So does that address the, like, how can containerization and cloud forward initiatives help the networkers?
Oh yeah, initiatives. Kubernetes is basically a way to make a network exist everywhere, like it's one office. So that's containers. There you go. And same with swarms and meshes. So containers can unite things. It's because of containers that things can live together. And while developers might do the containers, they need networking for them to all talk.
Definitely.
So cloud needs more networking than other things. And when you don't think about networking in cloud, that's when you have vulnerable clouds where no one knows what any of the vulnerabilities are, and then you're getting hacked and don't even know it. So it's a bad idea to not think about networking.
Definitely. All right, well, I hope that answered your question. And if anybody else has any questions that you'd like us to talk about in our next episode, feel free to leave us a comment. If you liked this video, go ahead and give us a thumbs up. If not, that's okay too. Subscribe to our channel and say hi to Augustus. He's sleeping.
He's too tired to...
He's too tired to... sleeping.
Too tired to care.
He's like, I was sleeping. Why did you disturb me?
He's like, it's not that time.
He's just leaning away. He's like, don't even put me on camera today. I have my sleepy face on. All right, cool. Well, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week on the Cloud Underground podcast.
Take care, everyone.
Oh, where's my cursor? Okay.